All right, welcome to the ICMIZER tutorial for reviewing PKO hand histories. My name is Mike Wasserman. I go by Strung Out One on PokerStars, and I'm just going to be running you through some basic settings and showing you how to review a hand history on your own from a PKO tournament so that you can review some of these spots by yourself and not have to rely on somebody else. Or maybe you have no idea what's going on in PKOs and you want to learn. Well, this is going to be a good way for you to do it. So the first thing that we're looking at here, hopefully all of you have opened ICMIZER by this point. It's full screen here, and what I did to get into this screen is you click Load Hand Histories. Okay, and this pops up. Now, the first thing you can do is you can paste from your clipboard. So what that means is you can cut and paste a hand history into this section right here, and you can hit load, and it's just going to load the hand history for you, and then you can review the single hand. You can also open a file, which is what I'm going to be doing, but not quite yet. So you would just click this and navigate to where your file is saved on your desktop or in a file on your desktop. And then you open that file, that text file, and it will load the hands, and then you can hit load. And you can look at it that way. So you can do either a single hand history or you can do a full tournament review, which is kind of how we're going to do it today. So before we do that, you're going to need a tournament structure, okay? So in the event that you're reviewing a full tournament hand history and you want to go through all the spots, you're going to want to use this section right here. Now, ICMIZER, as you can see, if you look in here, you can see all the different sites where you can have hand histories, okay? You're going to have all different structures in here from all sites. The sites that have PKO information in the exported hand history are from PokerStars and Party Poker. It's not supported in any of these. It might be supported in some of the other ones, but as far as I know, it's just Party Poker and PokerStars. And I prefer to review them in PokerStars because of the way that the bounty shows up. It shows up as the actual amount that you win, and I think that that's easier for me to comprehend because that's how it shows up in game. We'll get into that in a second, but before we get into it, before we get into anything else, we're gonna hit the drop down menu here. You can see that there's sit and goes. These are all preset structures that the ICMIZER team has input for you. Okay, trust me, this is a lot of legwork for them to put all these in. So your job is to find a hand history that is as close to as possible as the hand history that you're reviewing, the structure that you're reviewing. But if you can't find the exact hand history, what you're going to have to do is create your own structure. Okay, so you're going to have to click on create your structure, and let's say you want a 55 PKO non-turbo. So whatever, non-turbo. You just title it yourself. You're going to want to make sure MTT is selected. You're going to want to select how quick the blinds are going up. So we're going to click normal. You want to click the network. Again, you can select any of the networks. You want to click that it's a progressive knockout, not a knockout. So you don't want to click knockout. It's going to ask you the same thing. It's not a knockout. It's a progressive. Then you need to put the number of players. Okay, so in this example, this is just going to be a test. We're going to say, let's say 500, and let's say the knockout size is, if it's a $50 tournament, the knockout size is 25 bucks. Okay, which is half the buy-in. Now, keep in mind, when you're using ICMIZER for these, you're going to get the most accurate numbers with 500 players or less. And the fewer players that remain in the tournament, the more accurate the numbers are going to be. Okay? Because there's less variables, there's fewer players in the tournament, there's fewer chips. It's easier for ICMIZER to figure everything out. Okay? So you always want to be choosing 500 players or less. So in a hand history where you may have 2,000 people in it or 1,000 people in it, and somehow you won, but you want to review the hand history, I wouldn't really review the first part of the hand history. It's going to be, the answers you get will be closer to chip EV. What you want to find is answers to ICM money EV. And that's how you look at this. And again, we will get into that in a second. So here you would put in all the payouts. Okay, so let's say 2,000, 1,500, or well, I guess they pay the same, first and second. You know, third place pays, let's say 1,200. Fourth place pays, you can hit tab or you can just click on the next section. Let's say 800, 700, whatever, doesn't matter, 600, 500, and then you hit create. Okay, now in an ideal world, you would put in all the payouts, and if it pays out 500 people or less, you can get really accurate answers right before the bubble, on the bubble, and everything after the bubble. So ideally, you want to put in all the payouts, and you can review all kind of mid stages on in a PKO, and that's going to be where that's where your highest EV of studying is going to be anyway for these things, because that's where most of the money is, right at the inflection point of the bubble, or moving close to the final table or at the final table. So you hit create. Okay, now if you look in here, it selected the hand history for me, but you want to be able to find it. So let's say that you close ICMIZER out, you want to go back in to find it, you just click the drop down menu here, you go to MTTs, and you should see it in here, and it's at the bottom. So this is the last tournament that I created. So you can select it. If you think there's a mistake and you want to redo it, you can delete it. You can also hit edit, and you can edit this section. Okay, so if you hit edit, it's just going to bring you right back here. If you hit delete, it's going to delete this. Okay, but you want to just make sure that you have it selected. So now we're going to get into actually reviewing a hand history. Okay, remember, you want to do 500 players or less so that ICMIZER's TrueBounty Model can figure everything out for you as accurately as possible. So now we want to select the structure that I already have created here, and it has all the payouts and everything. So this tournament had almost 2,500 players in it. So we're going to be able to look through a couple of hand histories and get some answers to maybe some close spots. So we select that. Now, make sure that you're in ICM Money EV. Like I said, you have these four options. You have Big Blind EV, Chip Big Blind EV, Chip EV, ICM Money EV, and ICM Percentage EV. Okay. For PKOs, you want to use ICM Money EV. It's going to be the easiest for you to comprehend. Now, FGS, don't worry about it. You can have it on auto or just have it on 0. Okay. Before we hit MTT mode, we're going to go up here. We're going to open the file, and we're going to find the hand history and load it. So I'm going to do that now. You can see here, I'm selecting the hand history. Now we have it all loaded up. Now we're going to hit use MTT mode. So it has the number of participants correct because we entered the structure. Now we need to make sure that these starting stacks are correct, which is 5,000, and we're going to hit load hand history. Now, when this loads, it's going to take a little while because ICMIZER is going through all of the hands that you played in the tournament, and it's actually finding your biggest mistakes in pre-flop spots, and it's going to make a list for you on the left side. So that's the first thing that we're going to look at right now once it loads. So you can see here, the hand history is loaded. We're going to go up to this section here and hit the ICMIZER tab. Okay. You can see on the left side, it's crunching numbers for you. Okay. None of us are smart enough to crunch these numbers on our own. We're going to need programs like this to do it. These are very complex equations that they're figuring out for us. So you can scroll down here and you can see your most profitable decisions all the way to your worst decision. Okay. Now, you can just click on it and it'll take you right to the spot. So this was a 6-3 off I had on the button. We were 3-handed in this tournament, and there was a 16 and a 14 big blind stack here. And it says that I could have jammed any 2 cards profitably. Okay. This is without looking at what their calling ranges are. I would guess that their calling ranges are tighter than this. So this is probably even more profitable than what it says here. But It says that it's 44 bucks in EV to jam 6-3 off. 3-2 off is worth $25, and then aces is worth about $500. You can always click on detailed results. What I use this tab for is the EV of my stack. So if I fold in this spot, my stack is worth $10,644.28. And if I jam, my stack's worth $10,688.42. So you can see it's worth about $24 more if I jam the 6-3 off. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean we're supposed to. It doesn't mean that was the right play to do, but you could see that it was profitable and I did not take the spot. Okay, so remember, EV fold is how much your stack is worth if you fold. So it's basically how much your stack is worth right now in the tournament in ICM. One last thing before we get into the actual hand histories. If you're not clear on any of this stuff, make sure you go through the tutorial and click this button up here on the top right. And it's going to drop down all these different tutorials. You can create a custom tournament. You can learn how to use MTT mode, which we're using in this video. You can learn how to set up a hand, import hand histories, edit ranges. All this stuff's going to be really useful and really, really important for you to not mess up. Because remember, if you input bad information, it's going to give you a bad answer. If you input good information, it's going to give you a good answer. So make sure that you are doing all the right things on the front end and inputting everything properly. Okay, so take the time to go through these tutorials. They are very helpful and actually very intuitive and easy to navigate. All right, so the first thing we are going to do here is we're going to jump in to a hand with approximately 500 people left. So let's hit the replay button and start going through them. So once we click on this, we have a couple of things to look at here. First is going to be, how you navigate through the replayer. So this is the next hand. This is last hand. This is this hand. You hit ICMIZER, it will bring you back into the ICMIZER section with all the answers. This is the action, left and right. So we hit that. Now we folded. Not to, foreshadow what I'm doing here. Also on the bottom here, you can click on any of these, and these are different hands that you played. And you can click on them and review those hands. On the left side, it has the hands in order. So you can see what the next hand is. The next hand we were dealt Queen 7. The hand before this we had Queen 3. It tells you you were in the small blind, cutoff, hijack, MP1, all that stuff. On the top left, you have these check marks. You have 5 boxes that you can check or uncheck. So reverse list is for GG and natural 8 hand histories that export backwards. So they start with the first hand. They start with the last hand in the tournament. You're not going to need that for any other poker site, so we're going to have that clicked off. Auto jump to hero is going to jump right to our action, so we want that. Color VPIP is going to tell you if you won or lost the hand or didn't play the hand. You can see that here. The darker green means you won more. The light green means you won a little. Color hint results. Again, that's the colors that I was just talking about, so we're going to have that on. And then show known hole cards. We don't want that because it can influence what we think we should be doing in hands. Okay, so we have that clicked off. So I would suggest clicking these 3. Also, at any given point, you can look at what your pot odds are and the equity that you need to put money into the pot. Now, below each player, you can see that we have a bounty. This is where the bounties are. Okay, so this person has collected quite a few bounties at this point because they started with, only $12.50 under their name, and now they have 106. So they've collected a ton of bounties. I've also collected a decent amount. And we're getting deep in this tournament. We're really close to the money at this point. I think there's give or take 500 people left with 460 spots paying. Or how many spots are paying in this? Let's hit load. Let's go here. We can just hover over this. This is the structure for this tournament. And you can see that 413 spots are paying. So 500 people left. That's perfect to be looking at reviewing hands for this, because you get to see, you get a good idea of what you should be doing approaching the bubble. It folds to you in the small blind. You cover the big blind by a lot of chips. So we can definitely jam here I mean, I know that, but let's take a look at what the numbers look like. So the important thing is that we cover him. Okay, so let's hit ICMIZE. We can see that we can jam almost any two cards. This is saying that he's calling with 46% of hands. Okay, I don't think that's the case. Let's actually assume he's calling with something more like this, 25% of hands. I think that's a lot more reasonable. He's probably calling with these pairs. So let's hit ICMIZE again after having adjusted his range. Now we can jam any two cards. You can see aces is gaining about $34 in EV, and three deuce off is gaining about $4 in EV, which is more than 10% of aces. So it looks like a spot where you can pretty comfortably jam any two. But again, it's going to depend on if you have all your inputs correct, and make sure that you've put in the proper structure and you know exactly how many people are left, or approximately how many people are left, and it's going to give you an approximate answer. Now, remember, once you do hit ICMIZE and it gives you this answer, let's say that you go into a bunch of node locking and you lock this guy at 26%, and if there's multiple people in the hand, you may have a bunch of ranges here, and you want to reset it, you can just hit reset locks. Okay, and it's going to unlock all the ranges again. So that's a pretty useful thing to do. Also, let's take a look at these things right here. Now, I'm going to adjust the stack sizes so that he covers us. So let's flip the stack sizes. Here I have 56K in chips and he has, 17, 18K. Let's flip that. So let's say that our opponent has 56,000 and we have 17,000. Okay. Now we saw if he's calling with 26% of hands, which is a reasonable range, we can jam any two. But now, having flipped the stack sizes around and he covers us, let's see how much we can jam. So we can still jam the queen nine suited with about 17, 18 bigs. We're not gaining that much in EV though, considering our stack at this point is worth approximately $166. We're gaining about $8 in EV. So I guess it's not too bad. Aces would be worth about $50 in EV, $49.50, as you can see here. But the most important takeaway here is, remember, if they cover us, we can't jam nearly as wide. But if we cover them, we have the chance to get their bounty, and we can jam and be much more aggressive and much more liberal with the hands we go all in with. When they cover us, we need to be a little more careful. You can see we can't jam all these junky hands. So before we move on to the next couple of hands here, let's kind of look at these numbers and see what these mean. So this is the stack sizes of everybody at the table. As you can see, I just adjusted them for this last hand. And these are the bounties that everybody has. So you can always adjust these. So you can say, like, in this scenario, we could flip the stacks around and say that he covers us. But then on top of that, you could say that we have, let's say, $25. So you can say that we have a $25 bounty instead of a $100 bounty, and then run the spot again. And then it's going to tell you, okay, in this spot, now remember, with a big bounty, we could jam fewer hands. With a small bounty, we could jam more hands because it's not as profitable for him to call our all in. Okay, so you are getting some coaching here too, but these are just the basics of PKOs and using ICMIZER. Okay, the next hand we're going to look at here is in the big blind with 2 sevens. We're facing a button open, and I'm going to walk you through how to get the best answer possible for this particular spot so you can find out what you should be jamming or what you shouldn't be jamming. Now, things to keep in mind in this situation. We see that he has 20 big blinds. Okay, that's 540,000 chips at this point. To start the hand, to start the hand he had 600,000. So it shows the 60K here, and he had 600,000 in his stack to start the hand, which is 20 big blinds. His bounty is $300. So if we bust him, you can hover over this, and you can see the immediate bounty, $299 is added to the bounty of the player who busts this guy, and $299 goes into my account in this spot. Okay, so let's take a look at what the range looks like. So we're going to hit ICMIZE. We can see there's about 13 people left. So if you click here, you can see in MTT mode, it says there's about 13 left. It approximately knows, it knows the full amount of bounties that are in play at this point, and it distributes them randomly over the other 13 players. Well, it knows how many people because of this hand history. It knows how many chips and bounties are at this table, but it estimates the other table here. Okay, but you don't really need to mess with this for the basics. So we're going to go back into the range, and I already was kind of running through this spot. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to right click on our opponent's opening range, and you can see that right here. I know that in Nash Equilibrium, it's going to say that he's opening about 37%. I already adjusted this range and said that he's opening something more like 30% of hands, 31%. Okay, now we want to lock that in, so make sure this is clicked. Then we want to right click on what his calling range is. Again, this is a range that I already adjusted. There was more A6, A7 in here. There was full frequency of pocket 5s and pocket 4s. So I reduced these frequencies or increased these frequencies by scrolling my mouse wheel up and down over this. So scroll all the way down on 4s. Let's say for the times he does have pocket 5s, he calls a shove with them 50% of the time. He starts to really call more frequently with 6s, and then 7s he always calls, okay? And then for the offsuit hands, we're saying, we're accounting for some outlier hands like him raise calling with King 10 suited, him raise calling with King Jack suited, Ace 8 offsuit. There's low frequency, that's the yellow. The yellow shows that he's going to call a shove with these hands. Okay, so we can see that it's locked in here. So we have his opening range, and we have the range that he calls a shove with. Again, you just right-click these, and you can go in and adjust the ranges. So what we're going to get now is a new output here, because this range is not locked in. We're going to hit ICMIZE, and it's going to, because I already put the range in, it's going to show the updated range. And so that's 73% of hands. When we looked at Nash Equilibrium in this hand, or when I did a minute ago, this showed 91% of hands because it was assuming that he was opening 37% of hands. So he was raising the button, but then folding to a shove more frequently. Okay, so I made a more realistic range, and then readjusted what we're allowed to jam based on that range. Now, just as a last little tidbit here of how to interpret this information, and this is my personal information, this is not from ICMIZER, but a good barometer or measurement that you can use to have an idea of what you should be jamming with or calling with is 5 to 10% of aces. So, and it seems to be right in almost every spot. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should call with 10% all the time or 5% of aces all the time, but it's a good way to look at the range and know and see where to start. So we can see aces is worth $500 to jam here. So if we go down here and we go to 10% of aces, we can look at, what meets the minimum requirement of 10% of aces, which would be about $50 in EV. And so we can see this is what the range looks like, all these dark green hands. And the light green, you can see they got cut out over here and down here. And then the red was already negative. So you can see the light green hands are actually profitable to shove based on the ranges that we input. But hands that actually meet the minimum requirement of what you might want in a spot like this are going to be in dark green. I'm not telling you this is the actual range. I'm just saying this is how you interpret this information. So for me, I would want to lean towards a little bit less than 10% of aces in a lot of spots when I'm the one jamming. So I might want to look for $30 in EV. Okay, so our range would look like that. But maybe I want to be more conservative because there's a lot of short stacks. Well, now maybe we want to have $100 in EV. And then our range looks like, only really good hands. So that's the way that you kind of navigate the interface here and figure out basically what you should or shouldn't be jamming in these situations. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next hand. We have an all-in under the gun for 8 bigs. Now, remember, this is the final table, so the numbers are a lot easier for the program to figure out. There's less variables. So let's hit the ICMIze button and see what it comes up with. So it's saying that we can jam 7s plus, ace 10 suited, ace jack offsuit. Now remember, the bounties are important, but there's also the prize pool of the pay jumps. So there's 2 separate prize pools. So it's taking all of that into account here. Now, it's not that interesting that we can jam ace king suited here, to be honest, because we have the top of our range, right? But what can we jam that's not the top of our range? So it looks like we can jam 7s as the bottom, but it's only yielding us about 43 cents in EV, given the fact that our stack, if we fold, is worth about almost $4,500. Doesn't seem to be a good spot. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind when looking at these spots. Just because it's green doesn't mean you should take the spot. But you can see we're actually fairly tight as far as jamming goes. Now, there may be other options. Maybe you can call here. Maybe you can re-raise the minimum to isolate the all-in. Maybe, there's different plays that you can do. But remember, ICMIZER is locked into shove or fold. So it's going to be most useful for spots where you only have a shoving or folding range. In this particular spot, we probably will have some hands that will call and fold to a shove, especially on deeper stacks. You're not really going to find spots where you're just shoving or folding. There's going to be a lot of other plays that you can do. So just keep that in mind as you go through these hand histories, that you can't really solve every spot. It's not realistic to do so. But as you get shallower stacked, that's where the shove or fold nodes are going to be the most useful for you. Okay, so in this particular spot, again, aces is worth about $532 if we jam, and 7s is worth about 43 cents. Now you can go into all these different ranges and you can say, okay, I think this guy's jamming, let's say he's jamming really wide, and see how that affects things. So that it locks this range in, and we can hit ICMIze again. And now we can start to put the money in with more hands because he's jamming wider. But let's say that this guy is only jamming aces. Let's say aces and kings, and hit ICMIze. Well, now we can only get the money in with aces because of ICM and because of how much our stack is worth, and the fact that his range is like only the nuts. Okay, this is not realistic, but I'm just showing you as an example. Okay, let's take a look at one more hand here, hand 378. So we're going to hit replay. Replayer, we're going to go down to hand 378. Okay, this was an interesting spot. So we're 4-handed here at the final table. Under the gun has 7 bigs. He goes all in. Button calls 7 bigs. Small blind folds, and it's on me in the big blind with 6s. Now, things to consider in these spots is, how active these players are. Is this guy just trying to wait everybody out? Now, obviously, in this spot, he only has 7 bigs. Everybody else has at least 50, so there's really he's not going to outweight anybody, right? He needs to gamble. So he should have a fairly wide range here. And then we should think that this guy has a fairly wide range that flats. So we're trying to figure out what we want to do with 6s. Do we want to shove? Do we want to fold? Now, again, this is a pretty dynamic spot, so there's a lot of different things you can do, right? Like, I could make it 1.5 million and fold to a shove, or I could make it 1.5 million and call a shove. I mean, there's all sorts of different things I could do. Also, if we covered this guy, then our options would be completely different. So we're actually going to go through a couple scenarios here. Let's hit ICMIze to begin with. knowing that the guy that flatted the button, so you can see here the action again, the cutoff went all in for 7 bigs, the button flatted, and I have 68 bigs here in the big blind and a chance to, put money in some form. So basically, do I want to call here or do I want to shove? That's what I'm thinking. It looks like we can jam threes here. We could jam ace 4 suited. We could jam ace 8 offsuit. But again, you're going to need to right click these ranges and adjust them properly. So let's say that the cutoff is getting in this range. So we'll say that that's right. So we'll lock it in. And then we have to put the range for the guy that flatted here. Now, if I don't think that he's trapping with these types of hands, then I can take them out. So we're going to take out the top of his range. Very interesting, right? It's going to really change this hand history a lot. So he might not even have king queen suited here. But let's say that he's not trapping. Well, that's going to change the EV of the spot a lot, okay? And then if he's not trapping, that means that he's almost never calling my all in, but let's say that he calls with ace jack. And that's it, really. So he calls a very small percentage of the time. Now it's going to say I can jam like any cards. Okay. Now that's not necessarily true. Again, I'm showing you an extreme example just to show you how the program works and to show you, some options that you have. But we can see here that, deuces is gaining $339 in EV. 3 deuce off is gaining $91 in EV. So something to consider in this spot. But that's assuming that he's never trapping and never calling your all in, except ace jack suited. Okay. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap this up. Just to reiterate and go over everything again, let's just real briefly do that. So when we want to import, if you want to skip to this section, you can, or tell people that want to watch this, they can skip to the end. We can either open a single file here, or we can open a file with the full tournament hand history to review. You can also copy and paste just the text into this section here. You want to select the closest structure that you can to what you're playing, or you want to create your own. Okay? If you don't know how to do that, you use the tutorial section up here. You want to have it in money EV. Okay? You want MTT mode on. You want to know exactly how many people were in the tournament, exactly what the stack sizes were, so that it has the exact chip amounts all set for you. And in the replayer, you want to click these 3 things: color hint results, color VPIP only, auto jump to hero. You want to have that selected. You can always look at your pot odds in every single spot. You have all the hands listed here. Once you ICMize it, you're going to have your biggest mistakes listed at the top and your most profitable spots listed at the bottom. So you can do that as well, and you can review that way. And I think that's pretty much it for this ICMIZER PKO tutorial. Again, my name is Mike Wasserman. If you have any personal questions or are looking to get in contact with me, you can contact me at strungoutcoaching@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to answer any personal questions. I am not ICMIZER support. If you have questions related to ICMIZER, you can contact support@icmizer.com, and they should be in touch with you within about 24 hours. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you all at the tables. Good luck out there.